Okay, I'm sorry I can't be there personally in present, but this at least was a way for us to get some information across to you guys. Hope you're having a good day. It sounds like everything's ticking along because you're a little ahead of schedule. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm not too sure how many of you are familiar with the Species and Ecosystems at Risk Local Government Working Group. I will use the acronym SEER for Species and Ecosystems at Risk, but Local Government Working Group is enough of a mouthful. We'll just leave it as it is. So I'm from the BC Ministry of Environment and Climate Change Strategy, and I'm in the Ecosystems branch in Victoria. This will not take too long, but I'm happy to answer questions either today or offline another time. So just stop me if you have any questions. Otherwise, I'll just plow through. So yeah, Juliet, thank you for inviting me today. You had asked me just to clarify for people, specifically why is private land important for species and ecosystems at risk conservation? You also said, like, who is the SEER Local Government Working Group and what are we doing? And also, how do people get involved? It's pretty straightforward. So some things we know about species and ecosystems at risk: they tend to like valley bottoms. So I tried to find a couple local pictures for you guys. That's the headwaters of the Toby Creek and Huckleberry Creek over in the Purcells. And then we also know that species and ecosystems at risk really like to hug around the coastal areas. So that's Oakover Inlet and Cow Bay over in Flores Island. So we also know people, there's Creston Valley and Vancouver, they like valley bottoms and coastal areas too. That picture on the top was a seaplane ride I had recently, actually. It was a very nice day, unusually clear for Vancouver. So all of this, we also know that private land, there's only like 4.9% of BC is private land, but there's a really high number of species at risk on there. We know that many SEER have very small ranges, which shows importance for place. And we also know that there's a lot of support. There's public opinion polls, and we've done our own engagement as well that really show this strong support for protection on private land specifically. And then you guys, Juliet, you guys did the survey, phone surveys, and 71% of Kootenay residents agree. So that's really cool. And those are really helpful when we're trying to do private land conservation. So in terms of private land and the Kootenays particularly, I think you guys are probably aware that we consider the Kootenays a hotspot for species and ecosystems at risk. There are a high number of occurrences, and it just emphasizes the importance of what you guys are doing and chatting about today. So that's really great. And local governments, you guys are so important to be that first point of call, which I'll talk about in a minute, for private landowners. We also know I've done some fairly crude, it's with slightly older data now, but I've done some analysis of the known, they're called element occurrences, through the BC Conservation Data Center. And on average, more than 50% of the known occurrences are on private land. So in the Kootenays. So in some places that's a lot higher, depends where you are, but it's quite a high statistic considering there's only 5% of BC being privately owned. So the Species and Ecosystems at Risk Local Government Working Group, I formed it over a decade ago, largely because of this issue with private land being so important. I took the model, some of you might have been on there was a webinar that Juliet hosted a couple of years ago where I explained it came from a model I'd worked in Scotland in local government, and it's just about fostering communications, trying to enhance protection for SEER on private land and local government land. So now we have people that are participating are provincial government staff, so that'll be environment folks. We tend to be headquarters focused, Flynn Row people who are regional focused, UBCM, the Union of British Columbia Municipalities, and over in total about 90 different local governments are on the group, which comprises all the regional districts in the province and probably 60 or 70 municipalities. People keep moving jobs, so it's hard to count always, but so that equates to about 180 people on this giant working group. We're more of a forum really, but nobody wanted to change the name. There's my kid in a local park in Victoria. So the emphasis is private land and local government land. So we have a website. If you haven't looked at it yet, please do. There's a bunch of information on there. There's a terms of reference you can look at, and a discussion paper, which was written almost 10 years ago, but there's some very valid, great information points there. And over on the right side, you'll see a more recent survey report that I'd done just to see how people were doing with some of the recommended actions in the discussion paper. So have a look. Oops, I just flipped. There we go. And then at the bottom, there's a bunch of notes on past symposiums we've done. So work to date. The last time we'd had a face-to-face meeting was actually just before I did the last KCP webinar, but it was in Victoria in January and February of 2017. And we have these, as I say, these documents are available online, and the picture at the bottom was actually acknowledging the great work that's happened in the Kootenays. We did a peer-nominated award across the province, and there was nominations and one recipient for each of 6 different regions in the province, and Regional District of East Kootenays won this lovely Robert Bateman print. And I think we really want to repeat those peer-nominated awards. I think they were really well received by local governments, and it really works to appreciate and recognize the hard work. And it's really, I think, meaningful when it comes from peers. So it's an example of something we've been doing. So other progress, it's really not progress, it's ongoing work of recognizing and valuing communication, and that's like between levels of government, so between the province and local governments, but also among local governments themselves. Really valuing multi-agency partnerships, working with Indigenous people, working with NGOs, landowners directly. There's a lot of strength in that. We're dealing with a complicated biology of a bunch of species and ecosystems at risk, so working with these partners is really valuable. And it really tries to recognize that existing work that's already happening on the ground. With I forgot to mention when I said who the membership of the group is, KCP and other sort of strategically oriented conservation partnerships sit as observers on the group as well, because we acknowledge what great work you do for us and with us. So in terms of how to get involved, it's very, very simple. You can just call me, or you can email me, and I'll add your name to an electronic, just an e-distribution list. And we have calls. Usually I try and do calls a couple times a year, or it's turned into more like a webinar now. So that's one way to get involved with the local government working group. And then one thing I also wanted to mention, some of you might have heard, my minister was mandated with coming up with species at risk legislation under when the NDP came in. So we have a website, the BC Species at Risk Project has a website on Engage BC. So you can sign up and they will give you alerts. An alert just came out a couple of days ago explaining that some of the engagement work we've done to date for the background pieces for the legislation have been posted. Summaries have been posted of that, and they're available online of sort of what we've heard from different stakeholder engagement sessions to date. So that is another way to get involved with sort of legislation stuff. And in terms of who is already involved in the local government working group, as I mentioned, all the regional districts are. And in terms of municipalities, there's 4 currently. We did have a couple of elected people from Grand Forks, but I don't think that they were re-elected again. So we need to find someone from there. But if you're interested or know anybody in any areas that are missing, let me know, and you can have more than one person happily can join from one local government. So that's me. Efficient. Any questions?
Thank you so much, Lynn. We'll just see if there's any questions. We've been in a windowless room all day, so I think people are beginning to.
I feel you. I've had, part of the reason I couldn't be in person, I've been back to back a lot of meetings, so I feel your pain, the low oxygen deprivation. It's not very.
So there aren't any questions, but we really do appreciate it, and I'll send out your email and website with the meeting notes so that people will see those.
Yep, no problem. Thanks so much for inviting me. So are you wrapping up now?
Yeah, we're just going to do a couple of little wrap-up things, and then we're done for the day. So thank you so much.
Okay, nice to chat with you, and have a good day,
Yeah, nice to
everybody.
see you.
Okay,
Okay, bye-bye.
bye.